Hi everyone, I hope you had a good weekend. Today, we will continue to work on the topic of the self with me. Before moving to today's topic, I'm going to ask two questions based on what you have learned last week. The first question is to choose if the sentence is correct or incorrect. Experimental social psychology understands the self mostly in terms of the relational self. Is this correct or incorrect? Please make a note about what you think. The second question is about which of the four theories at the bottom of the slide best describes the sentence at the top of the slide. Which theory do you think matches the sentence the best? So, the top sentence says, in the absence of obvious external determinations of our behavior, we assume that we are freely choose the behavior because we enjoy it. Please make a note of what you think. I'm not going to give you the answer right now. Please ask and check the correct answers in our live session. Okay? These are the learning outcomes. They are the same as previous lecture. The aim of today's lecture is also to help you to be able to define and describe the key terms on the following slides. One key thing we are going to do is we will try to apply cultural perspectives in the discussion of some psychological theories. These are the key terms which we will cover today. How individualism and collectivism are associated with self-esteem, and we are going to cover the definition of self-esteem and the outcome of the lower self-esteem, and self-discrepant theory, self-awareness theory, and self-serving cognitions, and self-presentation, and we are going to cover the self-representation in relation to impression management. Okay, here I have prepared another question. Please imagine that you are working as a manager in a company. Which of the following two options would be most likely to improve quality of life? Option A is that giving individuals the maximum opportunity to develop themselves. Option B is that having individuals continuously taking care of their fellow human beings. Which one did you choose? A or B? Here are the results. The vast majority of American, Canadian, and Norwegian managers selected the first option, stressing individual freedom. And most managers in Nepal, Kuwait, and Egypt selected the second option, stressing collective responsibility. These are interesting results, aren't they? Now, I'm going to talk about the relationship between culture and self. Although everyone has a unique self of self, there are also some broad cultural differences in people's self-concept. Social psychologists and cultural psychologists have focused on differences in the self-concept depending on whether individuals come from individualistic or collectivistic cultures, as well as whether people belong to one or more cultures. I think you are familiar with the term individualism and collectivism. The distinction of cultural orientation has been widely accepted in social and cultural psychology. Individualistic cultures such as in Western and Northern Europe emphasized personal achievement and uniqueness of the self. In such countries, children from an early age are encouraged to think of themselves as distinct and unique individuals, focusing on the aspects of themselves such as their inner thoughts and feelings that makes them different from others. On the other hand, collectivistic cultures such as in many Eastern European and Asian countries place more emphasis on groups and families. From a young age, children are encouraged to follow societal norms and be loyal and obedient to their parents. This more interdependent conception of the self is based on the relationship with others and the connection with families and social groups. Likewise, the way people see the self is different in these two different types of cultures. Specifically, people who live in individualistic cultures are more likely to endorse individual-oriented sense of self, but those who live in collectivistic cultures are more likely to endorse collectivistic values. According to the Hazel Marcus and Shinobu Kitayama, our independent self and interdependent self can be represented like this figure. Many Westerners have an independent view of the self as an entity that is distinct, autonomous, and self-contained. However, Asians, Africans, and Latin Americans hold an interdependent view of the self that encompasses others in a larger social network. This is another nice figure showing which countries have higher scores of individualism and collectivism. As you can see, Western European countries and Northern America's scores of individualism are high compared to Asian and African and South America. Okay, as we have been discussing, most social psychology textbooks will tell you that collectivistic cultures predominate mostly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. But individualistic cultures predominate mostly in Western Europe, North America, Australia, and New Zealand. Why is this said? These differences in the self-concept have been demonstrated widely by social psychologists and cross-cultural psychologists. For example, let's reflect on the question, who am I, that we have covered last week. Cultural differences was found in self-description between American and Japanese. North Americans mention more abstract personality traits. For example, I'm honest. And private, autonomous self-descriptions, for example, I'm happy, than do Asians. Asians, compared to Americans, make reference to more concrete context-specific characteristics or public social descriptions. Similar results were found in comparisons between American and Chinese students. Trofimov and colleagues found that private and collective self-cognitions are stored in separate locations in memory. First, people from individualistic cultures retrieve more cognition about the private self and fewer about the collective self compared with people from collectivist cultures. Akimoto and Sanbonmatsu, in their experiment, Japanese Americans and European Americans were given positive feedback on their performance and were asked to either publicly or privately describe their performance. As predicted, Japanese Americans described their performance less favorably than European Americans in public, but not in private. Steve Heine has also shown an interesting result of cultural differences on self-evaluation. Canadians were reluctant to conclude that they had performed worse than their average classmate. But Japanese were hesitant to conclude that they had performed better. However, it is important to note that we should not overemphasize these cultural differences at a national level because individuals within cultures differ so much. Each individual may have different levels of endorsement of cultural values. Simply to say that not all people who live in the UK show higher level of individualistic values. There are also people who show higher levels of collectivist values, right? Now, I'm going to show an interesting result in relation to cultural differences in identity consistency. When you look at the blue line here, Americans' self-view was consistent across 5 contexts: friends, parents, to younger person. In contrast, Koreans' self-view was not consistent. It's different. Their self-view when they are with their friends and parents, and their self-view is completely different when they are with professor, stranger, and younger person. So, it was more difficult to predict the profiles of social selves from the general self in South Korea compared to in the US. In the same research conducted by Sa, he examined the relationship between life satisfaction and identity consistency. He found that Americans with consistent self-view would be happier. Here, as you can see. But this may not be true mostly. Instead, life satisfaction in Korea was predicted more effectively by social appraiser. Social appraiser is the degree to which one believes his or her life is approved by significant others. So, this result is very interesting, isn't it? It may be interesting to think about yourself. Is your life satisfaction related to your own self-view or other related self? Also, if you want to know more about this research, you can read the original paper. I attached this file on my packet. So far, we have looked at individualism and collectivism. Which is better, do you think? Individualism or collectivism, or both? In complex societies and organizations, forming a synthesis between opposites has become increasingly necessary. Also, individualism and collectivism complement each other. So, the answer, as you can see, the answer is both. According to Adler, the individualistic culture sees the individuals as the end and improvements to collect arrangements as the means to achieve it. The collectivistic culture sees the group as its end and improvements to individual capacities as a means to that end. Let's try to respond this scale, which is measuring your level of self-esteem. The scale range is from 3, strongly agree, to 0, strongly disagree. There are 10 items in this scale. Let's do this one by one. First, I feel that I'm a person of worth, at least on an equal plane with others. Second, I feel that I have a number of good qualities. Number 3, all in all, I'm inclined to feel that I'm a failure. Number 4, I'm able to do things as well as most other people. Number 5, I feel I do not have much to be proud of. Number 6, I take a positive attitude toward myself. Number 7, on the whole, I'm satisfied with myself. Number 8, I wish I could have more respect for myself. Number 9, I certainly feel useless at times. Number 10, at times I think I'm no good at all. Have you done them all? Right. Then let's calculate your score. Before summing the scores, you should reverse the scores for the item 3, 5, 8, and 9, and 10. I will give you around 1 or 2 minutes to complete this calculation. Alright, I think you have done it. How is your score? Normally, scores between 15 and 25 are within normal range. Scores below 15 suggest low self-esteem. Some of you may have a higher score and some may have lower score. If, Even if you have got a low score of your self-esteem, please don't worry about it. Self-esteem can be improved and enhanced, Let's figure out how.